the A level. This cycle is for 6 years. Then the last education level we look at is the non-tertiary institutions or higher education level. And these are mainly certificate awarding institutions offering certificates under a modularized program. These are mainly on skills like welding, cosmetology, skills. So they offer certificates mainly in skills development, and they admit learners with a minimum of primary leaving examination. So still on the concepts, we will be looking at some indicators. These are measures of quality of education that underscore the outcome of education. So in terms of the measures of quality of education, there are 3 key indicators you'll be looking at. One is the pupil-teacher ratio. This is the proportion of pupils enrolled in a school or education system per teacher. Why do we need this indicator? It's an indicator for teaching workload, personalized instruction, and overall academic performance. So how many teachers are there? How many learners are there per teacher? Pupil-classroom ratio. This is the proportion of pupils per classroom in a school or education system. An indicator for adequacy of seating space for effective learning in a given school or institution. The pupil stance ratio is the proportion of pupils per toilet stance, which you would call as a latrine or toilet unit in any given school or institution. This is an indicator of sanitation adequacy and congestion in the education system. In undertaking the baseline education census, we followed several processes. And key to this, the first one, as is in our statistical production cycle, is stakeholder consultations. You need this to ensure that the statistics at the end of the day are relevant, they are of quality, and you're meeting the user needs. So we undertook several stakeholder consultations to determine what we are going to measure, which tools we are going to use, which methodology are we going to adopt. And the stakeholders included, we had a technical working group chaired by the Ministry of Education and Sports. We had the National Council of Higher Education and the Internal Security Organization, among others. So after these consultations, we went ahead to develop the questionnaire, test it, and then we went to recruitment and training of field staff, and then undertook data collection. This was in 2025, and then embarked on data processing analysis, report writing, and here we are today to disseminate the findings from the baseline education census. You will please note that throughout all these processes, we undertook validation exercise. First and foremost, the education census was complete coverage. We went to all schools in the country. And by all schools, yes, we covered all schools in the country. And the coverage was for all schools in pre-primary, primary education, secondary education, and non-tertiary education. In terms of the scope, the education census, unlike other censuses, the reference period was a school calendar year, which was the year 2025. And data collection was undertaken from April to November of 2025. Of course, this excludes the time when there is holidays. We didn't do data collection during holiday time. And the statistical unit of enumeration, which was our focal point of contact for data collection, was the school or institution. So wherever you'd find that, you would ensure that you undertake complete enumeration. And in the enumeration, what did we cover in terms of content? We looked at all the learners present at school at the time of the census. So it was a de facto census of those present at that point in time when we approached the school. We covered all teaching and non-teaching staff present at school at the time of the census. We also looked at identification particulars of the schools, learners, teachers, and non-teaching staff. The census also covered issues to do with WASH, looking at stances, water sources for drinking, what does the school use, what are the classrooms, what are the number of classrooms. We looked at the source of energy for lighting and cooking that the school is using, information, communication, and technology use for education in line with the new curriculum, which is promoting this a lot. So are schools in sync? We looked at school governance, but also among others. So we can't exhaust the list, but there is more to this. So as we undertook the census, of course, as we were setting out, we anticipated some risks, and we had to plan how will we mitigate these. So what risks did we anticipate, and how did we address these? One of them, we knew that there will be schools inflating number of learners. And how did we ensure that this doesn't affect the exercise? We conducted a physical head count of learners in all classes from the same school at the same time. We also ensured that enumeration of all classes in the same school was done at the same time, so we avoid the issue of inflating numbers in a given class or school. But we also expected that learners would be ferried from neighboring private schools to public schools with the aim of inflating the number of learners. So to ensure that this doesn't happen, what did we do? This was mitigated by visiting all schools in the same area at the same time. We also ensure that we enumerate all classes in the same school at the same time. So we had a phased out kind of data collection. You'd go by region and ensure within a region you go to a district, a parish. Everyone is deployed to ensure that the parish is covered at once, leaving no one behind before you move to the next. But we also ensured that we had unannounced visits to schools. So yes, there was publicity. The schools were expecting us, the teachers and everyone, but they were not certain which day we would be going to the school. So that way, as you ferry, the loss is on you. So we would come in and enumerate and walk out. So that helped to avoid this occurrence of ferrying learners from neighboring schools. But we also anticipated insecurity during the census period, and this was mitigated by working closely with security institutions prior and during enumeration. This mitigated the exposure in terms of security and ensured that the exercise was a success in such areas. So as we're implementing the baseline education census, we faced some challenges. Some risks, of course, materialized into challenges, but some we just found as we were doing the exercise, either data collection or analysis. So we also had to ensure that these are addressed. So what challenges did we find? One was that some schools with more than one education management information system number or the same EMIS number being shared by more than one school. So you'd find a school, either they are sharing an EMIS number or a school has several in the system. The respondent was the head teacher or the principal. So you'd get different numbers and you're wondering which one do I take. So for us, for statistical purposes and data collection to continue, we address this by generating a temporary unique code for such schools that had that problem. But we also found that some learners had more than one learner identification number, which is the LIN. So what did we do? We considered the most current learner identification number. There were also some learners who did not have a learner identification number. This is not something you can force or impute or anything, so we left it as blank, indicating this learner doesn't have a learner identification number. There was also difficulty in accessing learners, especially during examination time. And this was addressed by collaborating with the head teachers and following the exam timetable closely to undertake the activity outside examination time. So there had to be a lot of cooperation between the field teams and the school head teachers. There was also reluctance to provide information, mainly in the Greater Kampala metropolitan area. So this was mainly here, but we also experienced it elsewhere. So how did we address this? This was addressed by increased publicity and sensitization to the general public, students, teachers, and parents. The other challenge which we faced was that the teachers' strike, which was mainly in public schools. So this was addressed by rescheduling the data collection activities for affected schools until normalcy returned. So you would skip those schools, do the private, those not affected, and then come back. We went back when the strike was called off. The other challenge was early closure of schools before the end of the official term. This was addressed by enumerating the schools in the subsequent phases. We had several phases of data collection, so you would carry it forward and take note that this school was not enumerated because it closed. But amidst all this, there were other measures, including the revisits to schools and the use of digital technology to identify and solve the challenges in real time. So as I indicated earlier, there was validation throughout the census process. So the Bureau conducted a validation exercise over the period of data collection, processing, analysis to strengthen the accuracy and validity of Okay. Thank you. So as I was saying, this one, Joshua, can we have this one? Thank you. Okay. All right, so as I was saying, the Bureau conducted a validation exercise throughout the baseline education census undertaking. And this was undertaken mainly midway the exercise after phase 1 and 2. And we also undertook the validation at the end of data collection to check what we've done. And the validation findings revealed that, 1, data from the census, the baseline education census, were consistent with those from the validation revisits. The validation exercise also revealed that data on some learners in public primary schools confirmed the existence of pre-primary learners being reported to be in primary section, which is primary 1. And this was mainly in the public schools as indicated. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a brief overview on the methodology and introduction to the baseline education census. Allow me to invite the next presenter, Mr. Galande Johnston, to take us through the findings of the study. Thank you.
Riding on the already established protocol and as introduced, my name is Johnston Galande. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share with you the first part of the findings from the baseline education survey. As a way of recap, we were told that pre-primary is very fundamental, and it is for the children 3 to 5 years. And this is the age that you should know that the brains of the children grows faster than any other time in the child. So if you don't bother with your child within this age, whatever you do will determine what the child will be. So ladies and gentlemen, move with me and we'll see what we found out about the pre-primary schools. Overall, in the country we counted 38,347 pre-primary schools. And as you can see, we see that the majority of pre-primary schools are privately owned. However, 3,193 schools are attached to public primary schools. These are the primary schools that disclosed that actually they are having a pre-primary section. For those primary schools that did not disclose, we will realize that we counted them under primary. And as a way of telling you is that in other schools where they did not declare, but we also looked at the children at the age and whatever, they created their own classes, P1 Smart, P1 Junior, P1 Zero, P1 Higher, P1, in the way of hiding that they don't have pre-primary section. So which means 8.3% of the pre-primary schools were attached to public schools. Thank you. Now, if we distribute these pre-primary schools, if we distribute these pre-primary schools among the sub-regions that we have, we see that Buganda sub-region takes a lion's share of 15,846. But the good news is that early childhood development is embraced in all sub-regions. However, the lowest number of schools are found in Karamoja sub-region. Now, coming to learners, we counted overall in Uganda 674 learners in pre-primary schools. And we see that males are slightly more than the females. And this is just in line with the structure of the population, whereby we have at younger ages, the males are more than the females. So which means the females constitute 49% of the pre-primary learners. Now, we said that pre-primary is meant for 3 to 5 years, but we can also see that we have some learners who are 6 or more years. And we saw that 534,360 learners were above 6 years and above, constituting to 22.5% of the pre-primary schools. So they were outside the official school-going age for the pre-primary. But we also have those ones who are less than 3 years, accounting to 32,682. Now, when you come to learners by class, we see that baby class and top class are slightly higher than the middle class. And basically this where I told you that some people enter late, some people over. So you see that the top class could be having some learners who are above. But also some baby class could be having some who are less than 3 years. I want you to follow these numbers correct religiously, such that when we come to P1, we see how we are transitioning. Now, distributing the learners, pre-primary learners by sub-region, we see that Karamoja has the lowest number of learners, and still Uganda has a lion's share of pre-primary learners. Now, let's go to primary schools. Overall, in Uganda, we counted 43,567 schools, primary schools. And as you can see, we had more private primary schools than the government, whereby the government we had only 12,557, accounting to 28.8% of all primary schools in Uganda. Now, distributing these primary schools by sub-region, we see that Madi sub-region had the lowest number of primary schools, and Uganda had the lion's share of 16,538 primary schools. You can also look at your respective regions and see how you are faring. Now, so ladies and gentlemen, you can look at your sub-region and see how many primary schools that you have. Now, if we wanted to look at these schools by ownership, we see that, like we said, nationally, we have fewer schools compared to private schools. But also you look at public and also private. We see when you look at private, we still have more schools in Uganda, and the lowest is in Karamoja. But when we come to public, the lowest is in Kampala. So which means Kampala has the lowest number of public schools. And the highest remains in Uganda. Now, turning to learners. Learners, we counted 9,118,314 learners in the whole country in primary schools. And if you look at the male and female, we found out that females were slightly more than the males, constituting to 50.3% of the primary learners. Now, let's disaggregate these learners by class. We see that P1 had the highest number of learners, P3 and P4. But remember, when we were dealing with the pre-primary, we had around 700 learners in pre-primary. So if I told it was a policy that from pre-primary you go to primary one, we would be expecting to see around here also the same number. But here we have 1,000,000.7 additional 1 million, which means there are some learners who join from home to P1. Another thing that we note is that one would have expected a smooth flow from P1, P3, P4, P5, up to P7. But we also noted that there's a traffic jam in P4. People are not moving, and P2. So this is something that either it is from the parents or schools. So it is me and you to see what is bringing up the traffic jam, especially in primary 4. When we are dealing with the pre-primary, we saw around 700 learners in top. So if there was to be a program, if we would all embrace that program, we would be seeing 700,000 in P1. But because we are seeing 1.7, which means that not all learners go through pre-primary. So we have some learners who go through from home to P1. And we had said that pre-primary is essential and a foundation and to develop the child socially and mentally. So we are missing there. But also one would have expected to see a smooth transition from P1 up to P7. But we see there is a traffic jam in P4 of 1,534,993, which reduces to 1,186,629. And it's either me and you to go and find out, to unlock that jam, to find out what is causing that traffic jam for the smooth transition of learners from P4 to P5, but also we see some in P3. So it is us to do that. Our questionnaire did not have that question to find out, so we are unable to tell you. If I tell you, I will be just speculating. Now, let's look at these learners by age group. We also see that we have learners who are in the actual age, official age-going, school age-going class, 6 to 12, but we also have learners who are 13 years and above. They're supposed to be in secondary, but they're still in primary, to the tune of 2,433,566, contributing to 26.7% of all the primary learners with official going age. But we also have some learners who are less than 6 years. They would be in pre-primary. And these are 95,312 who are less than 6 years. But also here, 13 years and above, I think we can also associate it with the COVID. Some people didn't continue, others were, they jumped some classes. But let's see, once the COVID year ends, I think this year, we shall see if at all this is streamlined. Now, distributing the learners by sub-region, we see that still Uganda is taking a lion's share, and we see that Sebei sub-region has the lowest number of learners. And Uganda, taking the lion's share, it contributes to 10.1% of all learners in the country. So if you got 10 learners somewhere, one should be from Uganda. Now, we found out that government schools are fewer than private schools. But when it comes to learners, we are seeing that we have more learners in government schools than in private schools. Whereby, if you look religiously at all sub-regions, you find that almost all sub-regions